I don't know if anyone will read this, or if it'll just be another soggy journal buried under driftwood and sand. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe some things should never be found. My name's Aaron, 43 years old. Used to be a real estate broker in Tampa. Divorce, no kids, no pets. Just a burned out man with too much money and too little purpose. After the divorce, I sold everything I didn't need, rented out the condo, and disappeared to the coast. I wanted isolation, total solitude. I told myself I needed to find peace, but I think deep down, I wanted to disappear. I found this stretch of beach by accident, really. It doesn't have a name, not one on any map. About 3 hours north of Cedar Key, tucked away past rotting wooden signs and unpaved roads. No cell phone service, no tourists, just sand dunes, twisted driftwood, and gulls that screeched like dying things. I pitched my tent a few dozen feet from the shoreline, just above the tide, and told myself I'd stay a week. That was 2 months ago. The first few days were bliss, silence, just the sound of waves chewing at the beach, wind sweeping over the dunes, the occasional creak of my tent at night. I journaled, meditated, ate canned beans and boiled rice over a tiny propane stove. I stopped shaving. I stopped looking at my watch, and time blurred. Then, the voices started. They were faint at first, a whisper barely audible beneath the rustle of sand shifting in the wind. I remember one night, must have been my 10th there, I woke up to what I thought was someone calling my name. Aaron, it said, long and drawn out, as if carried on the breeze. I unzipped my tent and stepped out into the moonlight, bare feet sinking into the cold sand. Nothing. No one. I laughed it off. Maybe it was a dream, or maybe I was just going stir-crazy. I'd been alone too long, hadn't I? But it didn't stop. It just got worse. Each morning I'd find strange patterns in the sand near my tent. Spirals, symbols, crude shapes that looked almost like faces. I thought maybe animals were doing it, or the wind, but some of the markings were too precise, too intentional, like someone had traced them with a finger. One morning, I found words, just one actually, but it was enough. Listen, carved deep into the wet sand right outside my tent flap. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. The letters were jagged, almost etched with claws. I kicked it out with my foot, angry and nervous. Told myself a sick prankster must have found the beach, but that didn't explain the voices. They weren't just calling my name anymore. They talked about me, about my regrets, my failures. They knew things I never told anyone. You let her down, one voice hissed during a morning walk. You let them both down. The sand under my feet shifted, even though there was no wind, like something was crawling just beneath the surface, circling me. I tried to leave, packed up my gear and hiked back the way I came, through thorny brush and ankle-deep salt marshes. But the road I'd come in on, it wasn't there. Just more beach, more dunes, endless, indistinguishable coastline. That night, the tide rose higher than usual, much higher. I had to drag my tent farther inland as the ocean swallowed the shore. The wind howled and the voices howled with it. I swear I heard laughter, dozens of them, echoing across the dunes, male, female, childlike, inhuman. The sand near the water began to pulse. That's the only word for it. Pulse. Like a giant, slow heartbeat. I could feel it through the soles of my feet, and beneath it, faint but unmistakable, chanting. Words and no language I recognized. I stopped sleeping. I just sat up in my tent at night, flashlight in one hand, a dull pocket knife in the other, watching and listening. I buried the blade in the sand once, right where I heard the loudest whisper, just to prove it wasn't real, just to do something. When I pulled it out, the blade was warm and wet, with something black and thick. 3 nights ago, I found a face in the sand, not a drawing, a face, buried just beneath the surface, like a mask, eyes closed, lips smiling, human shape but wrong, stretched long like someone had pressed it into a rubber sheet. I knelt down, hand trembling, and brushed more sand away. The eyes opened. I ran, screamed, fell, cut my leg on driftwood. When I looked back, the face was gone. Last night I didn't sleep again. Around midnight I started hearing my own voice calling to me from the dunes. My voice, mimicking things I'd say aloud, jumbled and out of order. Peace is overrated, it said. Let it all go. Just let go. I know now what they want. The sand, it's alive. Not just alive, but aware. It wants me. It needs me to join it. I don't know how many others it's taken, but I see bones sometimes when I dig. Ribs, fingers, a jaw once, shattered and twisted like glass. It's wearing me down, making me forget what's real. I'm writing this now because I feel myself slipping. I caught myself whispering back this morning. I answered the voice. I don't even remember what it asked me. There's no leaving this place. I've walked for hours in every direction. It's all the same. Endless beach, no birds anymore, no clouds, just the heat and grit and voices under the earth. If you find this, burn it, leave, don't linger, don't listen. And whatever you do, don't answer when it speaks your name. People don't talk much about the Florida panhandle beaches during the off-season. Everyone thinks of them as spring break playgrounds with neon signs and drunk college kids frying in the sun. But come November, when the wind turns sharp and the sky stays gray, the whole coast changes. It becomes quiet, isolated, empty. I didn't go there looking for horror. I went to heal. My younger brother Adam drowned last summer. We'd been close our whole lives, and when he died in that lake, 27 years old, strong swimmer, good health, it cracked something inside me. The doctors called it an accident. Said he might have hit his head, blacked out, gone under before anyone noticed. But no one saw it happen. Just vanished below the surface. One moment he was there, the next, ripples. I took time off work. Too many memories in my apartment. Too many well-meaning friends with their tilted heads and soft voices. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. I needed to go somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could be alone with the grief. I found the rental on a forgotten travel blog. A small, stilled beach house on Allerton Bay. A tiny inlet nobody visits in the winter. The pictures showed a windswept beach, littered with driftwood, coarse gray sand, and a rotting pier leaning like a broken tooth into the Gulf. It was perfect. I booked it for 3 weeks. The first few days passed peacefully. I slept better, walked the beach in the early morning when the mist curled low to the ground, collected shells, read by the fire. I even began to talk to Adam quietly, just in my head, not as a ghost or a spirit, but like he was still beside me, walking barefoot in the sand. Then, the tide started acting strange. It came in faster than it should have, not just faster, harder. The water hit the pilings under the house like it was angry. At night, it would surge up the beach in bursts, then retreat so fast it sucked the sand into deep channels, leaving strange patterns like twisted tree roots. I remember waking up one night to the sound of something scraping along the floorboards, not footsteps, not scurrying, just one long drag, like a heavy wet sack being pulled beneath the house. I crept out of bed, heart hammering, and went to the back window. The ocean was gone. It had receded, but not in a way I'd ever seen. The water had pulled back hundreds of feet, exposing black, wet sand rippling like the hide of some enormous buried beast. The air smelled foul, like dead fish and iron, and the sky had a sickly red glow near the horizon, even though the moon was gone. Then I saw them. Footprints, dozens of them, walking up from the exposed seabed, crisscrossing toward the dunes. Some were human, barefoot, others were not. Webbed, clawed, and they were fresh, still sinking at the edges. I should have left then, but I didn't. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a dream maybe. I was tired, I was grieving, I wasn't thinking straight, and yet the next morning, when I went out, the prints were still there. The tide had returned, but the sand near the waterline was torn and churned, like something had clawed its way back in. That afternoon, I found a seashell on the porch. Not unusual for a beach house, but this one was dry, pristine, almost surgical in shape. It was long, white, and curved like a crescent moon, smooth as bone. I picked it up and froze. There were carvings on it, not cracks, carvings, symbols, Jagged little marks like tiny teeth had chewed patterns into its sides. I threw it, and that night I dreamed of Adam. He was standing in the surf, just where the moonlight kissed the waves, smiling, wearing the clothes he drowned in, a blue t-shirt and those khaki shorts. His skin was pale, almost blush, and his lips were tinged purple, but he didn't look dead, just cold. I ran to him in the dream, fell to my knees in the wet sand and hugged him. His body was damp and smelled like seawater and rot. He whispered something in my ear, something I couldn't understand, and then his eyes rolled back and his mouth opened, too wide enough to let the ocean pour out of him like a wave. I woke up gasping. From then on, things only got worse. Objects in the house moved when I wasn't looking. Wet footprints appeared on the wood floors, trailing from the front door to the kitchen. I started finding sand in my sheets. Sometimes I'd hear the creak of porch steps at night, but no knock ever followed. And the voices, always just beneath the sound of the waves, whispering, laughing, calling my name. Sometimes I heard his voice, Adam's, soft and croaking, like something that had been underwater too long. "Come out here," it said once. "It's warmer in the water." I started sleeping with the lights on, sat up most nights holding a fireplace poker like it could protect me, but it didn't stop them, whatever they were. On the 12th night, I found the basement door open. I didn't even know the house had a basement. I'd assume they were hollow, just support beams over sand, but there it was, an old wooden door half hidden behind a pile of firewood, wide open, leading down into the pitch black. The stairs were wet. I took 3 steps down before the smell hit me, brine, rot, and something old like a shipwreck. I thought I heard something breathing down there, a slow sucking sound, like lungs struggling to expand. I ran back up and slammed the door. The next day I packed. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about healing. I needed to leave, but my car wouldn't start. Battery dead, no signal on my phone, and when I started walking down the beach to try to find help, I realized something horrible. There were no more roads, no tire tracks, no sign of the rental owner nearby. Just dunes and ocean, as if the house had shifted, or the beach had. That night, I sat on the roof with a flashlight and waited for dawn. The sea was dead still, no wind, no waves, just black, stretching into the void. Around midnight, something started crawling out of the surf. I don't know how many there were, 5, 10 more. Pale figures hunched over, glistening wet in the moonlight. Some crawled, some limped. Their faces were obscured, like sea creatures with melting human skin. One of them looked up at me. It had Adam's face. Not just similar, his face, stretched and slack, eyes milky white, mouth moving without sound. I screamed. I screamed so loud I lost my voice, but no one came, just the tide, rising again. And now I'm here, still in the house, still on the beach. I don't know how many days it's been. I don't eat anymore. I barely sleep. The whispering is constant now. Sometimes it comes from the walls. Sometimes I hear breathing beneath the floor. The ocean never leaves. Don't hear this or read it and come looking for the house. Don't try to find Allerton Bay. It won't be on any map. The beach only finds the broken ones, the grieving. It calls to people who've lost someone. It knows, and it doesn't just want to comfort you. It wants to give them back. But they won't be the same, and neither will you. I should have trusted my instincts the first night I saw her. I'd gone to my cousin's beach house to clear my head after a brutal breakup. He owned this small, weather-beaten cottage out in a place called Fairway Cove, one of those half-forgotten spots along the Carolina coast, the kind where the air always smells like salt and old rope, and everything creaks, even when it's not moving. He said I could stay as long as I wanted. Good spot for some peace and quiet, he told me over the phone. Nobody there this time of year, except the gulls and ghosts. I thought he was joking. The first few nights were uneventful. I'd light a fire, pour some bourbon, and listen to the surf roll in. It was calming, in that desolate kind of way. No cars, no neighbors, just me, the dunes and miles of empty beach. Then the storm hit. It wasn't a hurricane, just a violent, the kind that tears at the trees and turns the sea into a snarling thing. I watched it from the back porch, wrapped in a blanket with a mug of whiskey. The wind howled like a wounded animal, and waves crashed against the rocks like they were trying to eat the shoreline alive. And that's when I saw her. She was walking along the surf line, barefoot, hair tangled and soaked, her dress trailing behind her like seaweed. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining her, just some ghostly shape caught in the storm's fury. But no, she was real. She didn't seem to struggle against the wind like I was. She moved with it, like it was part of her, like she belonged in the chaos. I called out. I don't know why, I guess some odd reflex. She didn't respond, didn't even turn her head, just walked slowly, deliberately, eyes fixed straight ahead toward the jetty at the far end of the cove. I watched her until she disappeared into the rain. The next morning, the storm had passed. The beach was a mess. Broken branches, a couple dead fish, even what looked like a torn-up dinghy half buried in the sand, but no sign of the woman. I figured maybe she was a local, some eccentric who liked stormy walks, or maybe I'd had too much to drink. But then I saw her again. Same time, same place. Midnight, walking just at the edge of the waves, long white dress dragging in the foam. Her movements were stiff, like her joints didn't bend the way they should. Her head twitched every now and then, like a bird hearing something far off. This time I watched from inside the house, hiding behind the curtain. I didn't call out. I didn't move. I just stared. She stopped suddenly, right in front of the house. Didn't look at me, didn't even face it. Just stood there in the shallows, the water swirling around her ankles. I couldn't see her face clearly. It was too dark, but I could tell something was off. Her neck was too long. Her arms hung in a way that made my stomach twist, like they had too many joints, and her dress wasn't wet. Not anymore. It was covered in something dark, heavy, like sludge or oil. She stood there for maybe a minute. Then without a sound, she resumed walking, slow and swaying, until she vanished into the mist. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I found something on the porch. A single footprint, small, bare, and webbed like a frog's. It was pressed into the wood, even though the deck was dry. I crouched down and touched it. The board beneath it was cold, like it had just been lifted from the bottom of the ocean. I thought about leaving then. I even packed a bag, but something in me, the part of me still raw from heartbreak, still clinging to pain, kept me there. Maybe I wanted to see her again. Maybe I needed to. So that night, I waited. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, holding a flashlight and a knife. Dumb, I know. What was I going to do? Stab a ghost? She came again. This time, she was closer, and I saw her face. It was human, almost, but her skin was pale and stretched too tight, like it had been dried and tanned like leather. Her eyes were wide and glassy, unblinking. Her mouth hung open slightly, revealing too many teeth, all filed down to dull points. Seaweed was tangled in her hair, and her neck twitched every few seconds, like she was listening to something only she could hear. She stopped 10 feet from me, didn't move, didn't blink. Then slowly she raised her hand and pointed, not at me, at the house. I didn't remember going inside. I just remember locking the doors, turning on every light, and sitting in the corner until the sun came up. She didn't leave any prints that time, just a smell, like rotting sea life and old salt. I started digging after that. I found old news clippings in a box in the closet. My cousin must have collected them. Most were about shipwrecks, drownings, people lost to the tides. One stood out. A woman named Helen disappeared in 1954 during a storm. Last seen walking alone on the beach near Fairway Cove. Her fiancé had died at sea 2 weeks before. Witnesses said she was walking into the water like she heard something calling her name. Her body was never found. I think she's still walking, looking, listening. Last night, I heard her voice, not out loud, in the house, in my head. Do you hear the tide? She whispered. It remembers. That's what she kept saying, over and over. The tide remembers. The tide remembers. I'm leaving today. I don't care if I have to walk 20 miles through sand and pines. I'm not staying another night. But before I go, I'm writing this. For whoever finds this house next. If you stay here, don't walk the beach after dark. Don't follow the footprints. Don't answer when she whispers from the surf. And I tell you now, don't look in her eyes. Because once you do, you'll start hearing the tide too. And eventually, you'll walk right into it with her. You never think your child will be the one who disappears. I used to see those stories on the news. Missing kids, frantic parents, search parties, combing the woods or coastline. And I think, how could anyone lose track of their own child? It always seemed impossible. Until it happened to me. It was August. My wife Megan and I took our 6-year-old son Leo to Sea-Watch Beach for a short vacation. A little out-of-the-way place on the North Carolina coast, recommended by a friend from work. It's quiet, he said. Barely anyone goes there. You'll love it. And we did, at first. The beach was wide and flat, scattered with driftwood and empty for a few fishing boats far off the horizon. We rented a modest little beach house tucked behind a dune, weathered gray wood, windows that rattled in the wind, and sand in every corner. Leo loved it. He'd run into the surf, build crooked sand castles, and collect odd shells shaped like twisted horns and curled fingers. On our third day, everything changed. It was just after 6 p.m. The sun was low, turning the water orange. We were the only ones out there. Megan was rinsing off in the outdoor shower behind the house, and I was maybe 50 feet from Leo, fiddling with the portable grill. I turned to check on him, and he was gone. Just like that. The water was shallow. The tide was low. I should have seen him. He wasn't the kind of kid to wander. He stuck close, always did. I ran up and down the beach, calling his name with no answer. Just waves and gull cries. Megan came running, soaking wet and barefoot, her eyes already filling with panic. We searched the dunes, the house, the neighboring ones too, though most were empty. He was nowhere. We called the police and the sun went down. That night was the longest of my life. Flashlights swinging through the brush, canine units sniffing footprints that led nowhere, a helicopter circling above. Hours passed and nothing, like he had been scooped up by the sea itself. We barely slept. The next morning, just after dawn, one of the officers found him. He was sitting at the edge of the surf, facing the horizon, his tiny legs stretched out in the foamy tide. His clothes were soaked, his skin pale. There was a strange reddish smear down the left side of his face, like algae, but thicker. He didn't speak. When I ran to him, he looked up at me, but there was no recognition in his eyes. I hugged him so hard I think I hurt him. Megan collapsed into sobs. The officers looked stunned, relieved but cautious. Something was off. They checked him for injuries and found none. No bruises, no scratches, just that strange smear on his cheek and a thin black strand of seaweed wrapped around his ankle, knotted like a bracelet. When we got him back to the house, he still wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat either, just sat on the couch, staring out the window at the ocean, his little fingers twitching in slow patterns like he was drawing something in the air. That night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. I thought it was the TV maybe, or the wind. When I went into the living room, Leo was standing at the glass door, his hand pressed to the pane, whispering something rhythmically. I crept closer, heart in my throat. He was repeating a single phrase over and over. The cold is waiting, the cold is waiting. I called his name. He didn't react, just kept whispering. Then his breath fogged the glass, and I swear it formed a shape, a face, not his. Something long, hollow, with eyes that seemed to sink into the fog. I snapped the lights on. He blinked and turned, smiling, like he'd just woken from a nap. "Dad?" he said. "Did you hear the singing?" We took him to a local clinic the next day. The doctor said he was fine, just dehydrated, maybe in shock. Children process trauma in odd ways. He gave us the number of a child psychologist, told us to go home, get some rest. But I knew something was wrong. I knew Leo was different. He moved differently, stiffer, like a puppet that hadn't quite figured out how to be a boy again. His eyes, they used to be brown, warm, but now they looked darker and deeper, like something had hollowed them out and crawled inside. He asked strange questions. "Do you remember being under?" he asked at dinner. "Under what, buddy?" "The quiet. There's no up or down, just drifting." He started drawing pictures, dozens of them, all the same. A tall figure standing in the waves, arms too long, head shaped like a bell, surrounded by tiny shapes like children, kneeling in the surf. And some, the figure had its mouth open, and lines came out of it like music. Megan started sleeping with the light on. I found her crying in the bathroom one night, saying she'd heard something humming in the drains. She swore Leo stood outside their door for hours in the middle of the night, just standing there, not knocking, not speaking, just waiting. One night I checked on him while he was sleeping. There was seaweed in his sheets, damp sand on his pillow, and his lips were moving. I leaned in. He was speaking in a different language, not gibberish, something guttural, wet-sounding and rhythmic, like a chant. I recorded it and played it back the next day. The audio glitched out on my phone. We left the beach 2 days later. Megan begged me to go. We packed up and drove straight through the night. Once we were back inland, Leo seemed calmer, brighter even, but still not the same. Weeks have passed, and he still draws the tall figure, still whispers in his sleep. Sometimes I hear him humming low and tuneless, like a whale song. The dog won't go near him. Mirrors fog up when he walks past. And a few nights ago, I found wet footprints in the hallway, leading from his room to the back door, even though all the doors were locked. We never talk about the beach, not out loud, but sometimes when Leo is watching cartoons or coloring, I watch him looking out the window, toward the west, toward the coast, and he smiles, like he's remembering something or someone. I don't know what came back from the tide that morning, but I'm starting to believe it wasn't my son. Not entirely. Not anymore. I've walked the beach every morning for the last 4 years, rain or shine. It's part of my routine, my sanity, especially after I retired and moved to the little cottage on the coast of Maine. The sea calms me, clears my head. And then there's Scout, my black lab mix, and the best company a man could ask for. Loyal, gentle, and always nosing around with his tail wagging like a metronome. I never thought that a dog would be the one to dig up something like this. It started on a Monday, overcast, wind biting through my coat. The tide was low, relieving a stretch of beach riddled with tide pools and skeletal driftwood. Scout was off leash, bounding around the dunes like he was half his age. That's when I saw him stop dead, ears perked. Noise pointed down at something in the sand. He started digging. At first I thought he'd found a dead crab or maybe a rotting fish, but when I got closer, I saw something sticking out of the sand that didn't look like bone or shell. It was stone, dark gray and veined with something faintly greenish. It looked fossilized, but not like anything I'd seen before. I've collected rocks and fossils since I was a kid. Nothing professional, just an old hobby. But this was different. It looked almost like a skull, but not a mammal's. It was a wide, flat shape, like a horseshoe crab, but layered with what looked like scales. Not overlapping scales, stacked like plates of armor, with spiral ridges etched into the sides. There were 6 shallow holes arranged in a rough circle on the front. Eye sockets, maybe, or something worse. I told Scout to back off, and he did reluctantly. I brushed more sand away, and a long, spine-like ridge extended from beneath the skull, down into the dune. The thing was big, very deep. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to. Something about it made my stomach twist. It was cold, even though the surrounding sand was warm. Too cold, almost like it was pulling the heat out of the air. I marked the spot with a piece of driftwood and brought Scout home. I figured I'd take a picture the next morning, maybe send it to a university, get it checked out. That night, Scout wouldn't stop pacing. He'd wander the house whining, stopping every so often to stare at the door. He'd never done that before. He wouldn't eat either, just kept growling low in his throat, like something was out there. I barely slept. The next morning, we went back to the beach. The marker I had left was gone. The hole Scott had dug was filled in, but not naturally. The sand was smooth, leveled like someone had deliberately covered the fossil. I looked around, no footprints, no signs of tampering, just undisturbed beach, stretching out in every direction. Scout started whining again, then he bolted straight for the dune. I chased after him, and when I caught up, he was digging like mad. Same spot, same smell in the air, cold and metallic, the old iron in seawater. But the fossil wasn't there. Instead, there was a hole, a deep one, much deeper than a dog could dig. It went straight down 4 feet wide, the edges packed tight. At the bottom, something glistened, wet and black. It moved just slightly, like it had shifted in the shadows. Scout barked once, loud and sharp, and then the hole collapsed. I jumped back, pulling Scout with me as the dune gave way, filling the pit in seconds. The cold lingered, though. My breath steamed in the morning light. We left, fast. I should have never come back, but curiosity's a curse. That night, I heard scratching at the back door. I figured it was a raccoon or maybe a fox. But when I opened the door, there was nothing. Just footprints in the sand leading away from the house, not toward it. Not animal prints. Something different, long, dragging, with a wide, circular impression every few feet, like something heavy was being pulled behind whatever left them. Scout was barking like crazy now, teeth bared, hair raised along his back. He wouldn't calm down for hours. Then came the dreams. I saw things I don't have words for. Huge things, slithering through dark oceans under red skies. Cities made of bone and coral, built at impossible angles, pulsing with light from within. I heard languages that sounded like stone grinding on stone, and a name echoed in my head even after I woke. I started hearing whispers during the day, faint at first, then louder, always from the direction of the beach. Scout refused to go near it anymore. He'd plant his feet and howl if I so much grabbed the leash. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of wet dragging outside. Scout was already at the window, teeth bared, eyes locked on something in the dark. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it out toward the dunes. Something moved. It was huge, tall, towering over the grass. I saw those same spiral ridges glistening under the moonlight, and rows of plates like shell armor. Its head, or whatever was its head, rotated slowly, clicking as it turned, each motion too smooth, too fluid for something made out of bone or stone. And it turned toward me, and I saw the holes, 6 of them, not empty, watching. I slammed the blind shut and backed away. The whispers grew louder that night, like a choir just beneath the waves. Scout stayed glued to my side, shaking so hard his collar rattled. I held on to him like a lifeline. In the morning, there were tracks all around the house, deep and sunken, the same dragging pattern leading back to the beach. I reported it to the local sheriff. He laughed. Old-timers used to talk about that beach, he said. Claim there was something buried in the dunes. Old thing, ancient. You know how folks get. Sea stories. Barnacle-brained nonsense. I asked if anyone else ever found a fossil out there. He went quiet. Said, if you find something, best to leave it where it is. We left that afternoon. I don't walk the beach anymore. Scout won't even go near water. But some nights, when the wind blows just right, I hear the faint scraping again, like claws dragging across the sand, and the whisper comes back. So if you ever walk a beach and your dog finds something that just feels wrong, something ancient, cold, and whispering, bury it, leave, and never listen to the tide. There's this beach town I used to visit every summer as a kid, Claremont Shores. Nothing fancy, just an old stretch of sand and sun-bleached buildings, tucked away from the glitzier tourist traps along the coast. My parents took me there every year until I turned 16 and decided I was too cool for family vacations. I went back recently, 15 years later. It was supposed to be a nostalgia trip, A solo escape from my mind-numbing office job and the wreckage of a relationship I wasn't ready to talk about yet. I thought maybe the sea air and boardwalk noise would reset something in me. Claremont had changed, but not in the way you'd expect. It hadn't gotten fancier. It had rotted, like no one had touched the place since the 90s. Half the shops were boarded up. The old arcade was a graffiti-covered husk. Even the Ferris wheel had been taken down, replaced with a rusted skeleton and caution tape. But the boardwalk still stood, and at the very end of it, far past the frozen lemonade cart, the cracked ice cream parlor, and the busted-up shell of a surf shop, stood the Burger Barrel. I remember it from when I was a kid. My dad used to joke that the only reason people survived eating there was because the grease killed all the germs. The place always looked like it was one good breeze away from falling into the sea, painted a sickly yellow with flanking red trim. It had these cartoon burger characters on the roof, big grinning mouths full of square teeth, holding ketchup bottles like weapons. Even as a kid, it creeped me out. Naturally, I went in. The inside was dim and smelled like decades-old fryer oil and something else I couldn't place. Something sweet and sour and wet. The lightning buzzed overhead, casting everything in a hue. The booths were cracked vinyl, tables sticky, floor warped from water damage, and yet, somehow it was open. A bell above the counter jingled when I stepped in. A guy appeared from the back, almost immediately, late 60s, maybe older, skin like parchment soaked in grease. He wore a red apron, stained with a dozen shades of brown, and his teeth were yellow, not from cigarettes, from something else. "Welcome," he said. "Just you today?" I nodded slowly. There was no menu posted, no smells of sizzling meat or buns toasting, just that wet smell. Still make burgers?" He grinned. His tongue was a pale gray color. "Oh, we make them. Best in Claremont. Ain't nothing like 'em. You want one?" I should have walked out. Every instinct in me screamed to go, but something about his stare held me there, like I'd already agreed before I opened my mouth. "Yeah," I said, "sure." He nodded once, then turned and disappeared into the back. No sizzle, no hiss, just the faint squelch of wet hands on wet meat. I sat at a booth near the window. The beach was mostly empty. A few gulls squawked at each other near the trash bins. I checked my phone, no signal. Of course, this place felt like it was trapped in a different decade. Maybe even a different reality. 10 minutes passed. Then he came back holding a tray with a paper-wrapped burger and a side of what looked like fries, except they were too pale, limp, glossy. The burger itself was oozing some kind of translucent red sauce that seeped through the paper like a wound. "Eat up," he said, grinning. I peeled back the paper slowly. The bun was warm but slightly sticky. The patty was, I don't know, didn't look like beef, didn't smell like it either. It was pink in places, gray in others, with odd fiber threads curling from the edges. I took a bite. I don't know why. The texture was wrong, spongy, chewy, with occasional hard bits like cartilage. The flavor was hard to describe, metallic, sweet, almost addictive. My stomach churned, but I kept chewing. It was like my mouth moved on its own. "You like it?" the man said from behind the counter. Not a question, a statement. I swallowed, gagging slightly. What is this?" I asked. He smiled again. "It's old meat," he said. "Meat that remembers." I left without finishing the meal. Threw the rest of it into the ocean on the walk back. My stomach burned the rest of the day. That night, I woke up sweating and shaking. The taste of that meat still in my mouth, like it was trying to climb back out. I had dreams, not nightmares, memories, but not mine. I saw deep trenches beneath the sea, things moving in the dark, creatures with translucent skin and too many limbs. I felt cold water press in from all sides, and the sensation of hunger, a hunger so deep it had no bottom. Then I woke up and vomited something red into the hotel sink. It twitched before it went down the drain. I left the next morning, but the hunger didn't leave. Back home, everything tasted wrong. Normal food was like cardboard. I tried exotic meats, foreign spices, even raw things. Nothing satisfied it. Nothing. Shut it up. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, and I swear I can still taste it. Still hear the sizzle of that grill. though I never heard it the first time, and I've started chewing in my sleep, chewing my own lips, cheeks, anything I can reach. I looked up the Burger Barrel. No listings, no reviews, just one local forum post from 2009 that said, "Don't eat at the shack at the end of the boardwalk. They serve the meat from beneath, the meat that remembers. Once you eat it, it remembers you too." I think about going back, not because I want to, but because the hunger won't stop. And sometimes late at night, I hear the bell over the door, like it's calling me back. If you ever find yourself in Claremont Shores and you see that shack at the end of the boardwalk, don't go in. Don't smell the meat. And whatever you do, don't take a bite. They said it was going to be the hottest day of the summer. That's why everyone came out early, and I was one of them. Just another burned out guy trying to forget about his job, his divorce, and the way time seemed to crawl when you're not doing anything worth remembering. I didn't go with friends. I didn't have anyone to go with. I just tossed a towel and some sunscreen into a duffel, grabbed a cooler, and headed to Crestline Beach. It's a big public beach, about 20 miles outside town, normally packed on weekends, but this was a Tuesday. I figured I'd get some space to breathe, read, and maybe take a dip. When I pulled into the lot, it was already 3/4 full. That should have been my first clue. Kids were screaming in joy. Families carrying umbrellas and beach chairs were pouring across the parking lot, and lifeguards were already stationed on the red towers. The sand shimmered like powdered gold under the sun, and the air smelled like salt and coconut lotion. It was beautiful. But the longer I stood there, something began to feel off. I couldn't put my finger on it, just a strange tension in the air, a smell under the sunscreen and grill smoke, something sour and wet, even though the sand was dry. I shook it off, probably just low tide, I figured. I found a spot not far from the shore, spread my towel, cracked a cold soda, and started reading. The sun beat down, the seagulls screamed, kids laughed, radios played, all normal, until the lifeguard screamed. I looked up just in time to see him drop his binoculars and scramble down the tower, like his life depended on it. He hit the ground, turned to the crowd, and shouted, "Everyone, get off the beach! Get off the sand!" People froze. Some laughed nervously, thinking it was a drill. Others started gathering their things. A few kids kept playing. The lifeguard was running now, barefoot across the sand, grabbing at people, trying to herd them toward the boardwalk. Then, a woman shrieked. A high-pitched, gut-deep scream that froze my blood. She was only 10 yards from me, late 20s maybe, with a sun hat and a toddler beside her. She was sinking fast. Sand had swallowed her feet to the ankles, then her calves and her knees. Her hands clawed at the surface, but it was no use. Her child was crying, reaching out. She tried to lift him above her head, but her arms went under next, then her neck, then just the top of her hat, bobbling for a second, before it was sucked under like a whirlpool. She was gone in less than 10 seconds. Chaos broke loose. People ran, screamed, tripped, fell, and when they fell, they sank. It wasn't just her spot. It was everywhere. The entire beach had turned into quicksand. But it wasn't normal quicksand. I've read about that stuff. It's slow, syrupy, hard to drown in unless you panic. This was different. This pulled. It moved like something alive, sucking and swallowing anything that touched it. I saw an older man trying to help his wife out of a beach chair. They both screamed and vanished, waist first in seconds. A group of teenagers tried sprinting towards the dunes but collapsed when the sand ate their legs mid-stride. I stood frozen, watching a kid, maybe 7 years old, go under while his dad howled and pounded on the surface, already buried to his chest. Then Scout, the German shepherd that always runs loose at the north end of the beach, ran past me at full speed. His paws hit the sand like always, but this time they stuck. He barked once, loud and terrified, and was pulled down, tail last. I ran. I didn't think, just grabbed my cooler, ditched my towel, and bolted toward the boardwalk. My feet sank slightly with each step, but I stayed light, fast, and lucky. Others weren't so lucky. I passed a woman clawing at a baby stroller already halfway buried, the wheels spinning uselessly as she screamed. A teenager reached for my ankle as I passed, already up to his chest. I wanted to help, I really did, but his face was pale, eyes wide, blood coming from his nose. By the time I made it to the wooden planks, only a few people had escaped, maybe a dozen. The rest gone, vanished under sand that was still rippling, like a waddler sitting after a splash. No one knew what to say. We just stood there, panting, listening. A few sobbed. One man collapsed, clutching his chest. Then the sand stopped moving, just like that. Still, quiet, and peaceful, like nothing had happened. The boardwalk creaked underfoot. Farther down, a few brave souls crept to the edge and looked back. You know what we saw? Nothing. Not even a shoe. Not a towel. Not a chair. Not a cooler or umbrella. Or even a child's toy. The sand was clean, smooth, unbroken, like it had been scrubbed. One of the lifeguards started dialing 911, but we already knew no one would believe us. Not really, not completely. When the rescue teams came hours later, they found nothing. No bodies, no blood, no evidence of struggle, just an empty beach on a sunny day. They chalked it up to group hysteria, claimed it was probably a mass panic, even heat stroke, hallucinations, trauma. But I know what I saw. I go back sometimes, not to the sand, just the parking lot. I sit in my car, engine off, and watch the beach. And sometimes I see small movements, ripples, like something is breathing just under the surface, waiting until it gets hungry, and the sand opens again. I used to love the ocean. I grew up in a landlocked town where most water I saw was from a faucet or the occasional summer thunderstorm. So when I moved to the coast for work, an old writing gig I thought would lead somewhere, I felt like stepping into a dream. The sound of waves at night, the salt in the air, the endless sky, it was peace. That peace didn't last. I rented a small place on a quiet stretch of shoreline in Oregon. Nothing fancy, just a weather-beaten cottage with a wood stove and windows that faced the sea. No neighbors, no tourists, just me, the gulls, and the ever-present crash of the tide. It was perfect for writing. At least, that's what I thought at first. I spent my mornings working on a draft no one would ever read, and my afternoons walking the beach. Miles of sand and driftwood stretched in both directions. There was a boardwalk that ended half a mile down, and beyond that, a jagged cliff and a cluster of rocks. I should have left when I found the first bones. They weren't human, I think. Small, delicate, like a child's, but wrong. Bent in strange ways, found half buried at the base of a dune, tangled in kelp and sand that stank like iron. I didn't touch them. I didn't even take a photo. I just stared, felt a chill slide down my spine, and walked away. That night, I heard knocking. Not on the door, on the windows. 3 soft taps, then silence. I told myself it was wind, branches, settling wood. But my window didn't face trees, just sand and sea. Over the next week, things changed. I stopped sleeping well. I'd wake up around 3:17 every morning, always 3:17, with the sheets damp and the air thick with the scent of seawater. My dreams turned dark. I'd find myself walking along the shoreline in pitch black night, something whispering behind me in a voice like cracking ice. I started seeing someone on the beach. At first it was just a shape, far off near the rocks. I thought maybe it was a fisherman or some coastal drifter, but they were always there, standing still, watching, too far to see their face. I waved once and they didn't move. After a few days I started walking the other direction. I stopped going out altogether by the 7th day, but they were always there, every morning when I looked out the window, just beyond the edge of the surf, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but never gone, and they started getting closer. One morning I woke to see footprints outside the cottage, barefoot, deep, not mine. They circled the house and stopped directly beneath my bedroom window. I called the sheriff, small-town guy named Reddick, told him an hour to show up, and when he did, the prints were already gone. Sand smoothed out, no sign of intrusion. "Sure you weren't dreaming?" he asked. I wasn't. The next night I locked the doors. except the blinds. Sat awake with a kitchen knife in my lap. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe I was just unraveling after weeks of isolation. At 3:17, I heard it again. Not just one window, all of them. Like someone was circling the house. I stood, moved slowly toward the living room, heart hammering in my chest. The blinds were slightly open. I shouldn't have looked. I really shouldn't have. There was a face, inches from the glass, pale, bloated, with skin stretched too tight, eyes wide and black like sea glass, mouth slightly open and filled with sand, just staring, waiting. I stumbled back and fell, knocking over a chair. When I scrambled up again and looked, they were gone. The next morning, I packed my things. But when I opened the door, the footprints were back. Dozens of them, not just human, webbed, crawling, some too large, others too small. I didn't leave that day. Something was wrong with the air. It felt thick, like I was breathing through wool. I kept hearing whispers from the dunes behind the house, wet, gargling voices that spoke in patterns, repeating names I didn't know. I boarded the windows and stayed inside. On the 10th night, I heard the door handle rattle. Then the lock clicked. I didn't move, just sat frozen on the floor, holding the knife again. The wood stove burning low behind me. The door creaked open. I swear I saw the ocean rise, like a wall of water standing upright in the distance, lit by the moon and something inside it moving forward. The whispers got louder. My ears bled. The house shook. Then I blacked out. When I woke up, it was morning. The door was still shut, my packed bags untouched. There was no sign of footprints, no face at the window, no figure on the beach, just peace. It's been 5 years since that night. I never went back. I never found out what happened. I just ran, drove until my car ran low on gas, slept in parking lots, called in favors, and never told a soul. But every now and then, when I sleep too close to the ocean, I hear them again. The whispers, shh. And sometimes in the dark, I still see that face, pale, swollen, watching from beneath the tide. I don't tell this story often, not because I'm afraid people won't believe me, but because I'm afraid they will. It happened 3 summers ago, when I was staying in a rented cottage just outside of a little beach town called Ashburn Bay, nestled on the northern Atlantic coast. I'd gone there to work on a manuscript, something I'd been procrastinating for years. I told myself I needed the isolation, the calm. What I got was something else entirely. Ashburn Bay is small, quiet, the kind of town where nothing really happens. A strip of antique shops, an old lighthouse, a diner that closes by 8, and a stretch of beach that locals treat like their backyard. That beach is where I first saw him. It was my second evening there. The sun was going down and the sky had that orange-pink haze that makes everything look softer than it really is. I was walking along the shore, shoes in hand when I saw him. An old man, standing where the water met the sand. He had a long, dark coat, even though it was warm out, and he leaned heavily on a wooden cane. His back was to me, and he was just staring out at the water. I thought it was odd, but not enough to stop walking. Plenty of old-timers live along the coast. The next morning, I went into town for groceries and heard that a teenage girl had gone missing. 16 years old, last seen walking her dog at the beach at sunset. Her mother had found the leash, half buried in the sand. No one knew anything else. I didn't think about the man with the cane until later that day. When I walked the beach again, this time in the morning, there he was. Same spot, same coat, same cane, still staring out at the ocean. This time I stopped. "Beautiful morning," I called. He didn't turn, didn't move. I waited, expecting him to say something, but he just kept standing there. Eventually, I walked on. Over the next few days, more people went missing. A man jogging at dawn, a woman who ran the surf shop, a pair of college kids camping on the beach, all last seen near the water. I didn't say anything at first, didn't want to sound crazy, but I saw that man with the cane every single time someone vanished, always near the surf, always staring out to sea, never blinking, never speaking. I finally asked someone in town about him, an old bartender named Clyde who lived there all his life. You mean Joseph? He asked, wiping a glass. I shrugged. I don't know his name. Tall, pale, long coat, wooden cane. Doesn't say much. Clyde froze. His hands went still. He looked at me, the color draining from his face. Joseph Daniel's been dead since 1972, he said. That's when I laughed. A weak, nervous laugh. No, I saw him. I mean, I've been seeing him every day this week. Clyde didn't laugh back. He told me the story, right then and there. Joseph Darnell was a fisherman, lived alone in a cottage off the cliff above Ashburn Bay. One night there was a massive storm, waves like walls, lightning that split trees in half. Darnell went out anyway, trying to save his nets. People told him not to, begged him to wait, but he didn't listen. They found his boat the next day, splintered and washed ashore. No sign of Darnell, except that's not where the story ends. Clyde leaned in and lowered his voice. A week after he disappeared, a little girl vanished on the beach, then a couple, then a family. People said they saw a man matching Joseph's description walking along the surf before each one went missing. They started calling him the Watcher. I swallowed hard. So what did they do? Clyde shook his head. Nothing. Because by the time they figured it out, the disappearances stopped. For a while, years even. But then he'd come back, just for a summer, always on the beach, always before someone vanished. I tried to convince myself it was a local legend, a spooky story to scare tourists, but I couldn't forget the face of the man I saw, pale, empty, like something that hadn't been alive in a long time. I decided to leave the next morning. That night I stayed inside, curtains drawn, lights off, but I couldn't sleep, not with the sound of the ocean pounding just beyond the dunes, not with that overwhelming sense of being watched. Around midnight I cracked the blinds and looked out, and there he was, standing just beyond the dunes, barely lit by the moon. His coat hung like wet fabric, his cane planted firmly in the sand. He wasn't looking at the ocean this time. He was looking at me. I backed away from the window, heart hammering in my chest. I don't know how long I stayed awake, maybe all night. When the sun finally rose, I grabbed my bags, tossed them in the car, and left that cottage without saying goodbye to anyone. I never returned to Ashburn Bay, but every summer since, I checked the news. I scanned headlines for disappearances along the coast. Small towns, missing joggers, empty campsites, forgotten beach roads. And once, 2 summers ago, I saw a blurry photo attached to an article about a boy who vanished during a family vacation. In the corner of the frame, far in the distance, almost lost in the shadows, was a tall figure with a long coat and cane, staring out at the water, just waiting. I never thought much about the sun. It was just always there, hanging overhead, warm on your face, good for a tan, bad for your skin if you forgot the sunscreen. But that was it. It was constant, reliable, until the summer we went to Gull's Point. It was supposed to be a reunion, just 5 old friends, a rented beach house, and 4 days of drinking, grilling, and pretending we weren't all falling apart in our 30s. We hadn't all been together in the same place since college, so we figured we'd celebrate the 4th together. I wish we hadn't. The place was isolated. One of those wooden stilt houses perched right at the edge of the beach. Behind it were empty dunes. In front, a wide stretch of silver sand and nothing but ocean. The first 2 days were perfect. We barbecued, played music, even shot off a few fireworks the night before the 4th. We laughed like we used to. I hadn't felt that young in years. The 3rd day is when things changed. It started with the sunrise. I was the only one up early enough to see it. I'm not a morning person, but I couldn't sleep. I got up around 5:15, poured myself a mug of coffee, and stepped outside onto the deck. The sun was already up, high. Not the normal golden rise over the water, but already blazing white, like it had jumped ahead several hours. The light was sharp, almost blinding. The air smelled burnt, not smoky, cooked. I checked my phone, 5:17 a.m. I stood there for a long time, squinting into that weird high sun, until the heat pushed me back inside. When the others woke up, I told them, and they laughed it off. "Maybe your phone's wrong," Pete said, flipping pancakes. "Maybe the sun's just enthusiastic," Riley joked, sipping a Bloody Mary. But it wasn't funny by noon. It was too hot. I'm not talking July at the beach hot. I mean inhuman heat, the kind you can feel in your teeth. Our cooler melted, not just the ice. The plastic warped. The metal hinges softened. We tried to step outside, but within seconds the sand burned through our sandals. It smelled like a tanning bed left on too long, like skin left out in the desert. We cranked the AC. It sputtered, then died. We shut the blinds, tried to wait it out. Maybe a freak heat wave. Maybe we were being dramatic. Then the birds fell. Literally fell out of the sky. A dozen of them. Small ones, seagulls, even a pelican. Just dropped like rocks. Wings stiff, eyes cooked. One smashed into the deck railing and burst. Feathers and steaming fluid everywhere. That's when the panic really started. Pete tried calling 911, but no signal. None of us had it anymore. Phones stopped working. The batteries bulged from the heat. The windows began to warp. Not the glass, the wood frames. Paint started bubbling off the walls. The ocean shimmered like mercury, but didn't move. No breeze, no tide. Just an endless sheet of glowing heat. The sun was still high, still blazing, still overhead, and it hadn't moved since I woke up. It was 2:04 p.m. for 3 hours straight. Riley screamed from the bathroom. We found her holding her face in the mirror. The skin under her eyes had begun to melt. Not just sweat, melt. Pinkish glue sliding down her cheeks. She swore she hadn't gone outside. Swore she'd only been washing her hands. Pete grabbed a towel and wiped it off. The towel melted too. We started moving to the crawl space under the house. The only place still cool. It was dark, cramped, smelled like salt and mildew. We huddled there, watching the world above cook through the cracks in the floorboards. And then, the shadows disappeared. I don't know how else to describe it. You'd expect harsh sun to make harsh shadows, right? But then they faded. Like the light was everywhere from every angle. And no object could resist it, even in the crawl space. The cracks between the planks above us glowed so brightly, they cast no shadows below. Then came the buzzing. It started low like static. Then it grew louder, sharp, vibrating. It felt like it was inside our teeth, our skin. The house creaked above us, boards split. The sand outside started to shift, flowing like syrup. The ocean hissed like a pan on a hot stove, and the sun still hadn't moved. 3:18 p.m., 4:41 p.m., 5:59 p.m., no change. We passed out at some point. The heat, just too much. My dreams were full of boiling faces, stretched across sand, screaming without mouths. I saw the sun blink once. I had an eye in the center, and I felt it looking at me. Then I woke. It was quiet. I was alone. The others were gone. Riley's clothes were still beside me. Sandals melted into the wood. Pete's phone was fused to the floor. Something dark was burnt into the underside of the ceiling, above where they had been, like shadows but inside the wood. I climbed out slowly. The deck was cracked. The railing had fallen off. The air wasn't hot anymore, it was cold. No wind, no sound. And the sun? Gone. Just a pale gray sky, like early dawn but static. Not changing. No clouds, no movement. I left that beach house barefoot, walked for hours, found the highway eventually, hitchhiked with a trucker who didn't ask many questions. When I looked back, the beach was gone. The road that leads there had caved in. Officially, it was closed. They say 4 people were never found. They say heat stroke, alcohol, drowning. But I know the truth. The sun got too close, or maybe we got too close to it, and it saw us, watched us like ants under a magnifying glass. It stayed still and waited, boiled us in place. I don't go outside during heat waves anymore. I covered all my mirrors, and I haven't looked directly at the sun since. Because sometimes I feel that static again. Sometimes I check the clock, and it's the same minute for just a little too long. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear, I can feel the sun staring right back at me.